Welcome into After Carmen here from the Husky Stadium press box, where Ohio State just earned a 24-6 win over Washington, handing the Huskies their first loss here at Husky Stadium since 2021. Ohio State starting Big Ten play with a road win to improve to 4-0 on the season. And Andy, we cannot start this show without talking about anyone except the duo of Caden Curry and Kayden McDonald, because those two guys put on an absolute show today. Caden Curry, 11 tackles, tying the school record with 5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. Kayden McDonald adding 7 tackles of his own with, I believe, 3 tackles for loss and 2 sacks.
Yeah.
So an absolute dominant performance. We had seen those guys in non-conference play start to separate themselves as Ohio State's 2 best defensive linemen. But what they did today here in the first game of conference play, in my opinion, established them as 2 star defensive linemen, not just for this Ohio State defense, but maybe 2 of the best defensive linemen in the country.
Yeah, Caden and Caden, CC and K-Mac. I mean, it was a dominant showing from both of them. And I love watching Caden Curry play football, man. The motor, running sideline to sideline. The sacks are incredible, of course. But also, he was making tackles down the field in space. They had him kind of even drop into pass coverage a play or two, and he made tackles there. Always never giving up on the play is, I think, the most impressive thing. And you could tell it, man, when he's walking off the field and his face is just covered in eye black. Like, he told us after the game, because I asked him about it, he just starts with like a little cross and a circle on his face. And by the end of the game, it's like all over like this. So he was wearing the effort. But Kayden McDonald, too, the weight loss has made a difference for him. I think that's clear. Looked faster out there, played a lot of snaps. I'll be interested to see the actual snap counts from you after this one, see exactly how many. But Caden, plug up the middle, but had the athleticism still to get after the quarterback and make those 2 sacks. And now those 2 are the sack leaders on this team coming out of this game. So you have 2 elite anchors like that. That's really all the foundation you need to have an elite defensive line on the whole. Ohio State has 2 of the best defensive linemen in the country, it looks like, through 4 games, as you said.
And an elite defense as a whole. I mean, this is a defense now that, if I'm doing the math correctly in my head, they've allowed 22 points in 4 games. It's pretty damn good. And, I think we saw at times the defense look a little more vulnerable today. This, we said it all week, was the best offense Ohio State had faced all season. At the end of the day, they only allowed 6 points. But much as we've seen from this defense, dating back to last year on their way to winning a national championship, and certainly so far this year, you get into those goal line situations, you get into those 3rd, 4th down situations. This defense time and time again comes through with clutch plays that gets the Buckeyes off the field without allowing touchdowns. That was certainly the case today. Washington gets into the red zone 3 times, doesn't score a single touchdown, settles for 3 field goal attempts. One of them, they decide to try a fake field goal. That didn't work. And then, really the game-stealing play, effectively, Kayden McDonald there in the 4th quarter, sacking Damon Williams Jr. on 4th down. So this defense as a whole is just off to a phenomenal start, and I think this was as impressive as any performance yet. When you look at, this was a Washington offense that was averaging more than 55 points per game coming into this game, and Ohio State held them to single digits.
Absolutely. I think the most impressive thing and important thing for this game, I had said coming in, was containing the feet of Damon Williams. He's a great passer, don't get me wrong, but he gets out of the pocket. That's when he becomes really dangerous. And he had a couple of chunk runs in this game, a few, but really, I think he finished with like negative 30 yards rushing or something like that after the last Curry sack. I don't know what the exact total was because I was down in the elevators at that point moving to the field, but all around really impressive performance. And Arvell Reese, I think early in the game, Damon got out in space on a scramble where it was basically him and Arvell Reese. And if Arvell tackled him, it was going to be no gain or a short gain. And if he makes Arvell miss, it's probably a touchdown. And he put like 2 juke moves on Arvell, tried his best to shake him, and Arvell wrapped him up and took him down. And I think that got in his head along with the pressure. We kind of talked about coming into this game, as good as Washington might have a first-round pick at quarterback, running back, and receiver. Jonah Coleman had a pretty good day for them. But the offensive line was a bit of a question mark. And lo and behold, Ohio State ends up with 6 sacks, I believe.
Yep.
So excellent day. Kenyatta Jackson Jr. also was pretty good on the D-line today, kind of in support of the two Cadens there. And they got after Damon. They put pressure on him. I think you could tell he was a little bit rattled that he couldn't just scramble when he needed to. And it really made a difference. Jonah Coleman broke off a few nice runs, but they did what they needed to in those areas. And like you said, goal line stand university. We have a T-shirt if you want to rep it. It's you can't say enough about this defense's performance all around. The back seven, I think, will go a little untalked about in this game because of just how dominant the defensive line was there. But great job in the secondary, too, to limit the passing attack for Washington. And Davis Enigbenosin, really short tackler, had a great play in coverage, really clean play in coverage on a downfield shot that was important. I was impressed with his performance. There's just a lot to rave about with this defense.
Now, flip it to the other side of the ball. Certainly not Ohio State's best day offensively. They didn't score until it was just a little over a minute left in the first half. But, ultimately doing what it needed to do to win the game. And I think, honestly, I don't think the stats fully reflect how well Julian Sayin played today. I was really impressed with Julian Sayin. We saw early on, pretty conservative offensively, not passing the ball a lot on those early drives. Never got the deep game going today. I don't think they had a pass longer than like 18 yards on the day. So they never got that deep game going. But I think Julian did a phenomenal job of managing the game. I think the pass protection wasn't quite as strong in this game as it had been in non-conference play. I think there was quite a bit of pressure in the pocket. That's one of those things. I feel like I need to go rewatch the game to really kind of evaluate that. But he did such a great job all game of handling that pressure, making smart decisions in the pocket. And I think the biggest thing, we've talked about it a couple times on these after non-conference games. One of the biggest thing I said I wanted to see more of from Julian Sayin was when there's open space and Ohio State needs him to run the ball for yardage, can he do that? And we saw him do that a couple times today. Didn't necessarily go for first downs, but there was one in the second half, I believe. They're looking at a long, I think a 45-yard field goal on third and a country mile, as you would say.
As I would say, yes.
And he gains 12 yards, doesn't get them the first down, but it turns what would have been a tough field goal for Jaden Fielding into a much more makeable field goal. Plays like that, those kind of heads-up plays are big. And I just think, and again, you're talking first road start. I mean, he played 10 snaps against Michigan State last year. That was his extent of road experience coming into today. And we keep saying it every week, but he just doesn't look like a first-year starter out there. He looks so poised, so composed. It's not always about making the spectacular. And there were one throw to Max Clare late in the game, just threw it on a rope there. There were some nice throws, but it's not always about making the beautiful deep throws that go for big plays. Sometimes it's just about managing the game efficiently, not making mistakes, and I thought Julian Sayin did a phenomenal job of that today.
Exactly right. It was the decision-making and the pocket presence. Like you said, there was a lot more pressure, at least it felt like in this game, than other games Ohio State has played. And, being great at escaping pressure isn't always about scrambling, right? It's what C.J. Stroud did when he was here. You just take a step up, make a guy miss. You loop out, extend the play. I mean, Julian did a lot of that today. There was a lot of times where a Washington defender was there, and if he had just stayed on his spot, continuing to look downfield, he would have gotten sacked. But he makes a guy miss or makes a move to kind of get out of the pocket and extend the play, either throw it away or find someone open. I think he ended up only taking one sack in this game. It was really good on that front from Julian Sayin. Offense as a whole, it was just, the first half was really weird, man.
They only had 3 possessions.
Exactly. And so that in and of itself is going to limit what you do, but you drive right down the field that first possession, 4th and 1. C.J. Donaldson talked about it after the game. Your power back's got to be able to fall forward and pick up that first down, lower the pads. I'm sure it's something that CJ's going to work on. And to his credit, he responded really well to that play. 2 touchdowns, converted a couple other short yardage opportunities. One as a receiver. The last touchdown there that sealed the game, where they drew up a really nice play design to get him open into the flat and ended up going for 6. I think the run game as a whole wasn't that bad, and so you had the stop on 4th down, you had the punt that followed it the next possession, then they get the touchdown. Coming out of the second half, you drive right down the field, get a touchdown. They were pretty efficient in the second half offensively, but you could tell that it was a very methodical approach in this game. Kind of the same thing we saw last season, where they're going to take...
And against Texas.
Yes, and against Texas. They're going to take the play clock down. They're going to take their time. They're going to make sure they win the situations. It's about execution. I think that's Ryan Day's approach now, is since they, as subtle of a change as it might seem to some people, since they kept the clock moving on first downs, and it shortened the game a little bit, and Day kind of said, okay, we're going to focus more on execution, making sure we're efficient play to play rather than using tempo, getting up speed and doing those kinds of things. And it worked. It worked today. They shortened the game against a really good offense, and the offense executed when it needed to go and win this game in the end comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game, I think you could go back and say they could have won this game by more. Like, there were some missed opportunities there in the first half. I think there were also some missed opportunities on Washington's end. And so, ultimately, at the end of the day, you go on the road, Big Ten opener, you win comfortably. I mean, the spread was 8.5, and they won by 18. So, by and large, I think a lot to feel good about coming out of this game if you're an Ohio State fan. Still plenty to work on, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But, I think, we saw some good things from a running game today. We saw them and we wondered, would they commit to Bo Jackson? They did. It was clearly, Bo Jackson and C.J. Donaldson as the top 2 running backs today. James Peoples mixing in there, getting some pass-catching work. It's going to be interesting to see kind of that dynamic of how it continues to play out with the 3 running backs. But it was clear today they do trust Bo Jackson. They are going to use Bo Jackson in high-leverage situations. And against tougher competitions, he continued to look like that back who gives them the most in terms of running ability. And so, it's going to be interesting to watch that evolve. But I think, that was a positive step today in terms of Bo going into a conference game and performing well. And, ultimately, like you said, at the end of the day, they were efficient. They made, a couple mistakes early on that kept Washington in the game, allowed Washington to take the early lead. But in the second half, the game never felt in doubt. It was like, you have the middle 8, Ryan Day talks about a lot. That was really where Ohio State won this game. They score a touchdown late in the first half, come back, opening drive right down the field, take that 2-score lead. From that point forward, the game never felt like it was in any doubt.
Yeah.
And so that's what matters at the end of the day. Ohio State, comfortable win on the road to start Big Ten play against a Washington team that I'm going to keep watching the rest of the year. I'm going to be intrigued to watch because I think this is a pretty good Washington team. I'm going to be interested to see how much noise can they make against the rest of the Big Ten. And so we'll have a lot more to talk about with this game. There won't be an 11 Warriors live on Sunday because Andy and I are going to be on our way traveling back from here in Seattle to Columbus. So we will do that on Monday evening. So stay tuned for that if you want to hear more analysis from Andy and I, as well as Chase Brown. We will talk more on Monday evening. But for now, he's Andy Anders. I'm Dan Hope. This has been After Carmen, presented to you by the First Bank of Central Ohio, the official bank of 11 Warriors. We'll catch you next time.